Hey, hello, everybody, and welcome to Black Girl Health Collectives. There's some hoes in this house community discussion. I am so excited about today's conversation with Dr. Aisha Mays. We are going to get into kind of welcoming her, talking about her, a little bit about what the work that she does. And then we're going to ask y'all to engage in this conversation. So that's going to be the important piece of that. We are really excited that you all are joining us today. So Dr. Mays, you ready to get into this?
I'm totally ready. I'm so happy to be here. Thank you, Black Girl Health Collective. Thank you, Tasha, for having me. And I just can't wait for this conversation today.
Absolutely. Listen, I have been energized since we dreamed of this day coming. And I think, a lot of people are like, what is this conversation going to be about? Is there hope? Like, what is this whole? We're going to be unpacking some of those things. So I'm looking forward to today's conversation with you and others. So let's go ahead and let folks know who you are. So I have to read because it is amazing and I don't want to miss anything. So, Dr. Aisha Mays is a family physician who focuses on adolescent medicine. She is the CEO and founder of the Dream Youth Clinic in Oakland, California, and a clinical researcher with the UCSF Bigsby Center for Global Reproductive Health. Dr. Mays is an innovative adolescent healthcare leader and has special clinical teaching and research expertise on youth affected by sex trafficking and reproductive justice for young mothers. Her work focuses on providing inclusive adolescent family planning within a reproductive justice framework and on elevating the expertise of young people who choose to parent as a way to shift the national paradigm on young motherhood. Thank you so much for that. That's dear to my heart. So I just had to pause for a second. Her work has been featured in news outlets, including Ms. Magazine, the San Francisco Chronicle, and Cosmopolitan Magazine, if I could talk this afternoon. Dr. Mays believes that passion, creativity, critical inquiry, and building community are keys to dismantling inequitable systems and constructing a new vision for the future of healthcare.
Thank you.
That's not a lot. That's not a lot.
And I feel so fortunate and honored to be in community with you all, with Black Girl Health Collective, and to have so many amazing colleagues locally and nationally that are really pushing against so many of these systems that we know harm Black folks, we know that harm Black girls, and not just pushing against the systems, but creating a new structure, new paradigms that elevate Black girls, Black youth, and involve them as part of leading this new generation and narrative of healthcare. So
Absolutely. And I thank you for that. And I think what you're lifting up, which is so important, is we know these systems weren't created to actually work in the ways that they say they are. And we as a community need to start to think about how we build our resources to create spaces that are for us, by us. And so I love that, we found one another. It was so great to be in community with you when I first met you at our menopause brunch that we had in DC. So, I just love that we are just connecting those threads across the globe to really be connected in ways that are helpful and impactful for our youth and all of our generations. So I appreciate it. So let's get into it. I came today, I got my camo on, I got my little Kim pin. And so I want to just take a moment to kind of think about some things before we jump into the conversation. I know that we talked about today's session being about speaking to the adultification of Black girls and teens. So I wanted to, before we jumped in, for some people that may be a new like terminology for them. They may not know what that actually means. So wanted to have an opportunity for you to kind of let us know a little bit about what adultification is or means.
Yeah, and I appreciate this question. I'm so glad we're talking about this because adultification is one of those words that can feel very jargony, and is a word that was actually created to give language to an experience that we as adults and as society have placed on young people. So when we talk about adultification of youth or adultification of anyone, any being, but we're talking about young people, is really considering a young person and to be older than what they are, and not even older just by age, but by development, by maturity, by positionality, and going beyond considering a young person to be older, but actually treating them in a way that is discordant with them being an adolescent. I'm so happy that we talk about now in adolescent care, just talking about adolescence, we actually acknowledge the fact that adolescence is a real developmental stage, that young people, even a young person that might be 6'2", they might be taller than their parent or taller than most adults, they are still developing, they're still a young person, and their behaviors are not going to be like an adult behaviors because they are still developing. The brain is still developing, the body is still developing. The hormones are still going up and down, that it impacts young people's emotions and mood and things like that. And so when we place adult expectations and adult the way that adults are supposed rules and movement in the world on young people, it actually makes them more vulnerable. It can be very dangerous for a young person. They're not able to receive the support that they need, and it really can impact their mental health and their emotions. So that's what adultification is.
I appreciate that. And I know that there's some great research out there that was done. When I first heard about the term, I was kind of like, you know how you have a gut feeling about something and then something later comes out about it. You're like, all right, I felt that. I've experienced that. And so naming that, and for us to be able to think about how we may be being participatory in that, and how we may want to make sure that that's not actually what we're doing, that we're not creating more harm for our young people.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So I appreciate you for leaning into that and giving us that definition. In preparation for today, I wrote down some things as we're talking about, adultification, as we're talking about unpacking wholeness and what that looks like, and thinking about that term in general and historical context when we think about Black bodies, especially as we're talking about Black girls, and not having bodily autonomy, since the beginning of time. And then having this term, these terms be applied, and how the messaging around that can be. I just kind of wanted to throw out and offer anybody else to put into the comments, kind of when we hear some of these, if they've heard some of these terms, or if there are other terms that I may not even know, because I'm a woman of a certain age now. And I do hang with young folks, but I'm not up to speed on all terminology. But so I wrote down these things that came to mind for me. And so I wrote like hoe, thought, hoochie, hooker, strawberry, skeezer, tramp, jump off, side piece, slut, skank. Like the list goes on. And yes. And the development of this terminology to kind of less than, because that is like saying that someone is not for this, not great in society, or is less than-ness, which is something that as a culture, I think dominates most times. It's always you got to make someone less than. And how do you have these derogatory words that are created that are mostly attached to women,
Yeah,
girls.
yeah, and sexuality. You know,
Exactly.
I mean, all the terms that you stated, I think that most of us have heard them, have heard them and heard them frequently, and we know that they can often be attached to Black girls,
Absolutely.
and every single one of those terms has a sexual connotation to it, a sexual demeaning to it, whether or not that young person is sexual or not. And most of it is based on how they're either showing up in the world, how they look physically, how they're speaking, how they protect themselves, how they advocate for themselves, and they get tagged with these very derogatory, hypersexualized terms, just for showing up as a Black girl every day.
Yes, that's so spot on. I'm thinking about, you know, being a young woman growing up, and what you didn't want to be was labeled as fast. And
Yes.
so I'm just wondering, as we think about that term, what messages did you experience growing up young, or
Mhm.
young people that you know that you're around? What are some messagings that we can recall from, like, adolescence time, where you say is like the most critical time for development? Like,
Yes.
what are those messages that are being passed along?
Mm-hmm. Oh, I mean, just even hearing you say that word fast, it just brings back, it almost gives me chills because it brings me back to those memories of hearing that term and like, oh, that girl is fast, or you can't hang out with her because she's fast. And I think that it's unfortunate, but I feel like a lot of us, and especially a lot of Black girls, have heard that term fast. And even when I hear it now, it really gives me the chills. And another term I think about a lot, I used to think about a lot as a teenager growing up that also just made me shudder was switching. So
Ooh.
basically talking about the way that we walk and the way that I walk and like, don't be out there switching, or why are you switching like that? When it took me in the first few times I heard it, it would take me a while to figure out what people are talking about. Like, what does switching even mean? So and am I walking a certain way? Like, because I'm just trying to walk normally. So I remember had thinking when I don't want to be labeled as switching. So let me walk straight. I'm not really sure. Like, how can I walk so that no one's going to say I'm switching? And what I started to realize as an adult is, oh, it wasn't how I was walking. It's like your perception of my sexuality based on how I'm walking, which is really development, right? So
Yes.
again, that those damaging things.
Yeah, someone also said in the chat, being grown,
Being
and
grown.
and being just in your body. And
Mhm.
I remember messages about, yes, revealing clothes. The purpose, it was like, the messaging I got was like, you are not to be of the male gaze. um
Yes.
and so the switching, the
Mhm.
revealing clothes. And
Yep.
I grew up in, I'm gonna out myself, so this is just uncomfortable for me, right? Because, like, growing up in a Caribbean household, I was told very much like, your business don't go out there. But I already told my mom, you already know we going in. So
That's right.
I would say those of you that are in,
We're unpacking it. We're talking
we're
about it.
unpacking. We're unpacking. So I know that I grew up in a multi-generational home. So I had my great grandmother from Jamaica, and I have my grandmother from Jamaica, and I have my grandfather. And the biggest message that I got from my grandmothers were, you have to be a lady, and ladies wear pantyhose, right?
Mhm.
You
Yes.
can't be bare-legged. And also, my great grandmother, when I was younger, I was very much into sports. And so I was very competitive. The neighborhood kids were all boys. And so I was out there, like, knocking them down. We played football. I was the best on the
Mm-hmm.
football team. We played baseball. I was the best at that. And at that time, they weren't allowing co-ed baseball. But I was just, pig piling, doing all the stuff, right? And
Mm-hmm.
my grandmother was like, my great grandmother was like, "You are not being a lady.
Mm-hmm.
You're out there with those boys." And I was like, "I'm 9. I don't. I really don't know what that means. These are my friends that happen to be boys, but there wasn't anything sexual happening. But
Right.
that's the fear, right? Of like you're putting yourself in these positions to be fill in the blank."
Yeah, and that if you entice a boy, a man, and they if they feel enticed by you, it was your fault. You did
Absolutely.
something to make them feel enticed by you. So you need to cover yourself. You need to not speak up. You need to not really be seen so much, and certainly not be heard. And so it's this diminishing of like of who you are. You know, as you were speaking, I was thinking about some other things around like even the way we chewing gum. Don't go around popping that gum, or like how we show up and how we look and how we are as developing Black girls, so developing into adulthood, developing into your teenage years. And a lot of the messages that we're getting was diminishing. And it
Absolutely.
really was the impact of puberty. Like this is development. Our bodies are developing. Don't let your breasts start to develop. All of a sudden, it's like wear big things. Don't wear anything too tight. Someone can see that. Someone's gonna. And it's really and what that does to us in the middle of our development around our self-esteem, around our bodies, and around our voice.
Yes, and exactly. Don't be boisterous. Don't have an opinion, because that along brings along now. Not only are you being fast, but you're being aggressive and stay in
Mm-hmm.
your place. Yeah, it's so fascinating when you look back to kind of the messages that you were given, like you said, is like as if you have to do something to
Mm-hmm.
make sure that you're not enticing someone.
Yeah.
And so when we
Yeah.
were talking, go ahead.
Mm.
I'm
You
sorry.
go ahead.
Yeah, no,
I
I'm
was
just
like,
thinking
so,
like,
we're like so
these are all
excited.
the things that we have to like unpack as we are
Yes.
growing older, but we also understand that our families, our communities did a lot of these things in as a reaction for protection.
That's right. That's right. It was because in the things that our grandmothers and I want to. I'm sure my family is listening to this too. The things that our grandmothers instilled in us, that our mothers and our aunties instilled in us, were it was for protection. And though there were some real true threats that were happening, there were threats upon Black women, Black girls, every day, especially generations before us. My grandmother, my great grandmother, I mean, they were living in times where Black women's bodies could be taken and used at any moment in time at the drop of a dime. And so they had to teach their girls and really put these very restrictive things in place as to try and protect. And that wasn't even a guarantee. And so I also want to, as we interrogate these narratives and these things we had to live under, and we knowing how damaging they were. I also want to uplift and honor, of course, our matriarchs, because they were doing things because
Absolutely.
they knew the things that could happen if men were enticed, and how they were not able to physically protect us from a lot of that.
Absolutely. And
Mhm.
so, yeah, someone lifted up fear, and exactly right. So, like, I honor my multi-generational household, because I think about how there was a lot of wisdom in this space, and there was a lot of opportunities for us to have conversation and pushback. I was allowed to do that. I did it at a level that I knew that I could do. So we would have lots of dynamic conversations. So I knew, to stay in a child's place. Um,
Mhm.
but I also knew that we would have at the dinner table conversations around, it never was around sexuality, but it was about activism, political environment,
Mhm.
and all of those things. One of the things that I wanted to ask as well is that I think about this other level too of religion or spirituality being a part of messaging that folks have experienced, right? And some of those messages. And if folks want to jump into the comments and kind of talk about that as well. But I feel like, religion and spirituality played a huge part in a lot of messaging that I received.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, same. I grew up in the church and in the Christian church,
Mm-hmm.
and I remember always in my mind, I was always interrogating things in my mind, like as a young person, as a teenager, as an adult. I became more vocal over time, but I was always asking questions, especially when things didn't seem to add up. And there are so many benefits from the Black church, and the Black church has really helped to support the Black community over generations, and we know that. And we also know that there's also been detriment there as well.
Absolutely.
And one thing I remember noticing as a teenager is around the differences in gender, how men were treated and how women were treated, and just noticing the difference, and also noticing again the labels that were placed on women in our church, in the church community around this sense of being a woman or being a ladylike, which meant being quieter, being the helper, sort of doing what you're told, not being able to be in this space of independent leadership, but always being that support person and that nurturer, and that being a label that you had. If you were going to occupy a space, that was the space you were going to occupy, and then not having a lot of choice in that. And that always felt problematic to me around the lack of choice.
Yeah, I would say for me, I'm going to get to y'all in the comment section because
Oh
I
yeah, I
love
love
it.
the chat. The chat
I
is just,
love what's coming through.
thank you
Um,
all for all the comments.
yes, I feel like, yes, that was, my grandparents were Catholic and then they went Methodist, and my mom grew up Catholic and never pushed religion on me. I think for that purpose. But there was definitely um, Easter. I went to church. I had to wear the tights. I'm telling you, she had them on deck, sandal foot. I'm having like flashbacks. And so just thinking about, and I had to wear that dress, and I was not living in what society would call feminine in that way. I wanted to wear what I wanted to wear, and that skirts and dresses was not a thing for me. So I'm loving that folks are putting in there about the purity and the purpose
Yes.
of being desirable or worthy, right? And that being placed upon Black girls and bodies, and being pure in the way of someone saying a slip. Now
Slip.
I'm
That's
getting
right.
flashbacks.
I was gonna say that for my grandmother with the slip. If she saw that we had on a dress or a skirt and there was no slip, it was like it didn't matter how thick that dress or skirt was. Like, where's your slip? Put the slip on. I will never forget those slips. Yes, that was the respectability. Someone put in the chat respectability. So like the respectability culture, and part of that is being a pure sort of Christian woman, like this, that's part of it, right? Who speaks when spoken to, and is not too loud, and looks the right way, dresses the right way, acts the right way.
Absolutely. And I remember in being in youth spaces with young people, and we would do this activity about healthy relationships, and I would give them money, fake money, to kind of buy what like they wanted from their partner. And the highest top three was they had to be a virgin, they had to look good, and they had to be wealthy. And these are young people.
Yeah.
And that is still stuck with me to this day, that was kind of a part of this activity that we would do. And they would literally get $100, and some people would wait and spend.
Wait for it.
Yes. And you understand,
Yep.
it's all your money. And they were like, yep, I'm getting that virgin.
And it's that's so powerful what you're saying, because it also shows how those narratives are become internalized by young people, and not just girls, by girls, boys, non-binary. It isn't by young people. It really shows how these external narratives, these really damaging boxes that we put young people into in these really formative years, how that creates this this fantasy of what is like, what's the best, right? Yep. Even the word, even the word virgin, right? Like having a virgin, it's like, or I lost my virginity, right? When we talk about like the first one's first sexual experience, I lost my virginity. And it's like even using that terminology, first of all, losing something. It's like it takes away even the sense of agency that I might have made a choice. I was conscientious. I chose to share. So we lost something already. But then this virginity. So we've been given this concept of what a virgin even looks like, right? So someone with a long dress on and like long and how those narratives are. It is different from how you show up every single day.
Yeah, I think you're spot on. It's so deep into it that it's in the fabric, right? It's genderized almost. And so where do our non-binary folks come in? Like, what messaging are they receiving? And so when we think about that, and it's always gendered based, I think about when you say virginity, that one of the things that comes to mind is, so as we're sharing, so as a person who was a young mother, one of the things that I felt that I needed to do was, and I've been thinking about this as we were preparing ourselves for this conversation. One of the things that I would do is, because I was pregnant, I would always make sure that I said, "Oh, I got pregnant the first time I had sex." Like I had to say that as like I wasn't doing it all the time to kind of like.
Yes, you had to qualify because you weren't fast.
Yeah,
because
right.
you weren't fast.
Yes.
Right. So
yes.
You go back to that original. I'm not fast. I'm not out there like that. I'm not a hoe. I don't do this. I got pregnant the first time I had sex. So like and again, the things that we are that we're sort of living under, we feel like we have to, we did have to, and also a lot of young girls, Black girls, still have to explain themselves.
Yes.
Explain your behavior.
How did you let this happen to you? Where were your parents? Why did you do that? Oh, you must have been being fast because you put yourself in this situation. And so the judgment comes in, right? And so as we think about how people are either living this or defying it, I'm so happy about Dream Youth Clinic. And I wanted to say this because when I first met you and I got to see all of the amazing work that you were doing, and I said this to you earlier, like, where were you in 1989? It threw me into an experience of being othered, right? So when I became pregnant after I had my son, there was a school at this time that either pregnant girls or young people with children went to. So like they segregated us.
Yes.
Like, we can't be in the school system because then we're going to influence the other teenagers, right?
Yeah.
And so with that, the school was called Sims. I'm sure that they are no longer in service or ineffective service. But the name of it strikes me. But one of the things that I wanted to bring up, because I love that you are creating spaces for young parents, young women, because I remember they used to have us going to high schools to talk about young parenting, to discourage young teenagers, don't be like us. And so that was a pain point for a very long time.
Yeah.
They kicked me off the tour because I spoke up for myself, and I was not going to sell the dream of like, we're damaged or don't be like us. So I was I was kicked off that tour very quickly. So, and I actually had a secret meeting with the other girls with me, and I'm like, we don't have to go. Don't go if you don't want to go. And so it stopped for a while. But I just wanted to put that out there because I feel like we need to create more spaces because there's this culture of like, when is the right time to become a parent? And for some
Right.
folks, I mean, is there a right time, right? And so
Yeah.
like creating these spaces for our young people are so important. It hits different. I appreciate the work that you're doing. Um,
Mhm.
and would love to kind of see how you're defying like what society has put on young mothers and young parents.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing your story. And I saw in the chat, someone said they still have those schools, and they do, and they're all over the country. And this narrative that's been painted in the United States of young motherhood is probably one of the prime examples of attack against Black girls. Black girls have always been lifted up as a negative sort of trope of young motherhood. That first of all, why is it that if you get pregnant when you're a teenager that your life is over? Like, where did that even come from? Why is that even happening? Right? But what we do know is that it was something that was constructed from on a multi-system scale. It was constructed by our public health systems. It was constructed by our national, our federal, local, and state government systems. It was baked into presidential priorities over decades, both Republican and Democrat, nonpartisan, across partisan lines over decades, and the educational system. And so when you have a structure like that really has decided, a country that's decided that we are going to completely demonize young motherhood and create this system, it's what we come to know today. And even today, we can, if we talk to probably most adults in our lives and talk about a young person who's pregnant, and the first one's, oh my goodness, oh I'm so sorry, oh no, right? We're still living under that, and it never had to be that way. It's all, I feel like it was always a setup. So if you have a young person who gets pregnant in their teen or in early adolescent years, and you segregate them. I love that you use that word. You segregate them from their home school, which number one was illegal. In 1970, there was an act that was passed in 1970s, Title IX, that protects young people who are pregnant and parenting to be able to stay at their home school throughout their entire pregnancy. No one told young people, right? So you segregate them from their schools. You ostracize them. You give them these dirty looks, and you withhold resources and support. You make it really confusing about where they're supposed to receive prenatal care. You make it so that social workers who are supposed to support young people are now really just there to make CPS reports. So you create this whole system that really punishes young people who are pregnant and parenting, and then you report failures. Like, right, what do we expect? You report that they weren't able to do the things that they said they were going to do, but you never talked about all of the obstacles that were put in their way. And I really started to see that when I was, someone says labeled a statistic. Exactly. I really saw that firsthand when I was a medical student, and a young person I was mentoring as a medical student in the Midwest, it became pregnant. She got pregnant in her junior year of high school. And when she told her parents she was pregnant, she got kicked out of the house, right? We know this story, right?
Yeah.
It's happened to so many girls across the country, kicked out of the house, and she literally had nowhere to go. And so she moved in with me, and she lived with me for a few months. And during those months, we tried to figure out this young girl, who wants to continue her pregnancy. She said she wanted to become a mother, wanted to continue her pregnancy. Where is she going to go for prenatal care? How can we figure out housing for her? How can we figure out what school? And I really started to see the just the looks that people would give her, and the comments and the stares, and like and I noticed it as someone supporting this young person. I can only imagine how she felt receiving all of that energy. And it doesn't stop once a young person has the child. It happens. We have in our program Young Mothers Rising that we started to support young people and create this real empowered space for young folks who are pregnant, parenting, or planning to become pregnant, and talk about pregnancy, talk about motherhood, and create a space for them and with them. They would tell us stories about being in Target, going to get diapers for their child, with their child, and the stares they would get, the looks they would get. So it doesn't stop once a young person has the child. It is something that is a this stain that our system and our society has placed on young people, and refuses to let them get out of it. And when I started my clinic, I was like, there's no way. We're creating a space, an empowered space for young folks who are pregnant and parenting, and really centering Black girls in that space.
And I thank you so much for that. Like, it is much needed, and it sounds like you're doing amazing work. We need them everywhere. We need them everywhere now. And as you're thinking about that, like that, once you have the child, there are lots of looks, and then how does that manifest in folks, right? Somebody put in here, it's the hierarchy.
Mm-hmm.
It's the struggling to find boundaries because people are have been policing us since we were young.
Yes.
And so as we think about that, and we think about how does that impact us as we move forward, whether we were a parent or not, all of the messaging that we're given, all the things that have happened. You are creating programs, Black Girl Health Collective, those folks that we're in community are creating safer spaces for us to have refuge and speak and talk and commune with one another.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm loving that we are looking to defy all of those things that are impacting us, especially because as we become grown adults, the impact.
Yes.
It's like, even us talking about this is like, even us talking about stockings and, skirts and hems and all the things, it's bringing back like that inner child of then, and just thinking about that and how that impacts us for generations.
Yes. I mean, we remember these stories today, right? You and I, like, literally in this conversation in the chat, folks we're bringing up memories right today about memories we had many years ago. So those memories don't go away. And I'm just so grateful to the work of Black Girl Health Collective, of Dream Youth Clinic, that we are creating these spaces to defy the shame, to call out these things that have created shame, and also to transform these messages into those, like, these were things that were placed on us, and we are transforming this, we're reclaiming it, and we're creating something else. We're creating something new for the next generation of Black girls and the next generation of Black women. I think back to, we talked about our experiences, but we also know that Black girls that we care for today are having very similar experiences.
Absolutely.
We did a study a few years ago here in the Bay Area with Black girls around sexual health and reproductive health and some barriers around that, and they talked about this hypersexualization. They talked about this saying, "It must be jelly because jam don't jiggle like that." So, around like what happened, what people would say to them when they started to develop hips and they started to develop breasts, and men would say this thing, "It must be jelly because jam," and like, how could you degrade me like that? Right. So we know that even Black girls today are experiencing this. And so I'm just really grateful to our work around reclaiming and transforming.
I love that. Reclaiming and transforming. I think it's so important, right? I think about moving forward as we're thinking about sexual liberation, healthy sexuality. How do we live in our bodies and feel free to do the things that we want to do? There's nothing wrong with, all of us want intimacy. All of us want things. All of us want to be who we want to be without judgment. And so how do we, as we think about living in these toxic spaces or being judged, what can we do moving forward, as you're talking about, for generations to come, right? Like being in spaces that are multi-generational first, I feel like is a must, right? I think that young people need to have their spaces, but the ways that we can sit at each other's feet and talk about these things, to kind of notice, like, if we asked our grandmothers to, my niece who's 11, like, what are you experiencing? I'm sure it's not much different, but like, how can we create moving forward something that allows us some freedom, some liberation, some healing?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I really love what you said about the multi-generational spaces. And there is power in multi-generational spaces. And I think the way that it feels like we can do that in a really healing way is listening to everyone who's in that space. So that goes back to like listening to the young people in the space. So grandmas listening to the young folks, young people listening to grandmas, the children. So the teens listening to the children listening to the teens. Really creating a space where everyone feels heard and everyone's voice is being allowed to contribute. I think a lot of us in Black community have grown up have been in multi-generational spaces, and sometimes those spaces are not as empowering for the younger folks in the room. But we really can we can reclaim and transform that. We can create a space where we are listening, we are learning from everyone in those spaces, knowing that we all have these different vantage points, and we also mostly have areas of connection where we're all, like you said, we're all experiencing something very similar, the same thing. It may look a little bit different, but it really is the same thing. The other thing I always talk to my young people about, because adolescence is such a critical time in really developing, thinking about, experimenting with who you are. It's so important. I always tell them to think about labels. Beware of labels. When someone places a label on you, or someone says a name, calls you something, think about that. Is that something that feels like you, or does that feel like that's coming from them? And our gut always tells us, right? If someone's saying, calling you a hoe, does that resonate with you? Does that feel like who you are? Or is that something that they are placing on you? Because we know that labels and names, those things are a moving target. Those things always change. We don't know what name. Someone's going to make up a new name in 3 months for Black folks, Black girls. But does that feel like something that feels like you? Because our gut will always tell us that. And if that doesn't, then that's coming from outside of you. That's not you. And you can put that to the side. You don't have to, don't jump on these labels that people try and place on us. That was a lot of that damage that happened that continues to happen over generations. That's how we can start to dismantle some of that.
Absolutely. I love that. We need to have more conversations that are open to do that reclaiming and transformation. It's very funny. I was thinking, I had sent to a friend who I have on the West Coast. I said, you should join. And so when I sent the link, they said to me, so as you're thinking about labels, she said to me, I don't understand, like, what's happening? Like, are you the hoe in the house? And I'm like, I could be. Like, what are we talking about? Like, it's just like those things of like what you're saying is like, there's such a negative connotation. And how do we, flip things on its head and start to think about, when we think about wholeness, or we think about partners. I hear with young people, like, how many bodies do people have? And like that
Yes.
conversation
Yes.
is like, and I remember my mentor when we were talking about healthy sexuality, and we were talking about, people being tested, and when you're doing those assessments with people asking questions, there's always going to be that, oh, that's one more. Like, it's so subjective. Like, how are we having those conversations when
And
it's subjective? It's always going to be
why does that matter
more
anyway?
than you. Exactly. But
Exactly.
that's the point. And I think that people need to recognize that it's subjective to whatever you think it is, but that does not make it a fact or the thing. And
Right.
so,
because if you're having one sexual experience with one individual and that's happened over a long period of time, and that person is very abusive, very negative, very hurtful, how does that versus someone who's had multiple sexual experiences that have been consensual and healing, and there's been growth from that? Then, like, how do you which is why numbers really don't matter. It is like, what is that experience like? Do you feel ready? Number one, regardless of that other person, are you feeling ready at that moment, at that time? Are you feeling ready in yourself? Are you feeling ready with that person, those persons? Are you feeling ready there? Are you, does this feel healthy and healing? Is it pleasurable? Right?
yes,
It's
pleasure.
right? So if
Yes.
we're not talking about that, then we're really not talking about sexual empowerment or protection for young people, for Black girls, Black women, for any of us.
You said a word. You have said a word. I feel like we could go on for like hours, and I feel like there needs to be like a part 2, or
Yes,
folks need to come to the Black Girl Health Conference,
that's
the Black Girl
right.
Health Con in November, so that we can expand on this topic. I think we've just scratched the surface, and I want to be mindful of our time together. I know you are very busy and you took time out today to join us, and we are so thankful for that. I know that someone had put in the chat, what's our call to action? And that is a great question. That's a great question.
I can give a little try at that. I feel I'm gonna lean off of what you said, Tasha. And one of our calls to action is really thinking about these healing multi-generational spaces that we can create for Black girls. I think recognizing that Black girls in this society are still under attack, are still spotlit, and really need to be in these spaces where we are creating empowerment and support, and supporting their leadership and their voice. So I think these multi-generational spaces are so important, and we need to create those where we are listening and learning from each other. I will also say, coming to Black Girl Health Con. So we want to see you all in November at Black Girl Health Con, because if you enjoyed this, I think there's so much more to expand on Black women's empowerment, Black girl empowerment, Black girl joy, supporting Black girls in your life, especially young people. If you have a young person in your life who's pregnant, who has a child, just supporting them, giving them some love, asking like what they might need, any assistance or support, and just creating an empowered space. If you see a young person at Target, at the store, giving them a little nod, giving them some love, because we know that young pregnant and parenting young people are still treated with very high levels of stigma. And so, and what we can do to support young people in those spaces too. Supporting spaces like Dream Youth Clinic and Young Mothers Rising, who are supporting young Black pregnant and parenting youth every day too. It's another call to action.
I love that. Thank you so much, Dr. Mays. Did you want to drop any of your handles for folks to kind of check out Dream Youth Clinic?
Yes, please check us out. If you're in the Bay, stop by. We're in Oakland, California. On Instagram, we're Dream Youth Clinic. On IG and TikTok, Dream Youth Clinic. YouTube, Dream Youth Clinic. If you want to follow me just around some of the work that I'm doing, my Instagram is Dr. Aisha M on TikTok and on Instagram. We also are on Twitter as well. And so you can find us Dream Youth Clinic on Twitter. We're Dream Youth Clinic on all the spaces. And we'd love to stay in touch and interact.
Definitely. So check out Dream Youth Clinic and Dr. Aisha Mays. Continue to jump on our community conversations. And thank you all so much who have put beautiful reflections and thoughts and joined us in the chat. We appreciate you all. And thank you so much. And again, there is going to be more to come, I'm sure, at our Black Girl Health Con on November 2nd and 3rd. Tickets will be dropping soon, so check us out on Black Girl Health Collective on all media handles, Facebook, IG, where we're at now, Facebook now, YouTube. Please check us out. We really appreciate your time today. And thank you so much. Again, Dr. Mays, you have me out here sharing. Safe. I needed this. We needed this. Thank you so much.
We both went back. Yeah.
Yes. So much love to you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.